also feel like in some ways in terms of that question, I want to normalize not us doing that work all the damn time. I didn't like,
I get it. No, I get
I
it.
was like, we have to figure that shit out.
I thought you back out like.
So much shit. So you're just like,
Thank you so much.
I know.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yes. I didn't get a chance to reach out to Amber before. I know she just did the interviews with Kirk Franklin too. Oh my goodness. I know. She was in that Black popular fiction court. She was like, can we read? I was like, girl, we can read whatever we want. Or we can have it. She's like, we can read that.
Okay, so her book is about Black women. Definitely know that. And your story reminds me of Keisha Harris. Yes. Because she knows, and before she was on TV. Yeah. And so she kind of talks about pain experience. Yeah. So there's something about that experience of being a Black woman in Argentina.
I'll see you at the next
Thank
one.
you. Thank you.
If anybody is a part of the next panel, please come talk to me. And we're going to get started pretty quickly. If you're a part of the next panel, please come up to the front.
Okay. Hello, hello, hello. Is this on? Can you, yeah, is this on? Okay. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. We are getting started now, so please take your seats and simmer down. All right, so good afternoon and welcome to the Global Blackness and Black Left Scholarship panel. We don't have a formal moderator, so I am just going to kick us off. My name is Dr. Charisse Burden Stelly. We'll present our papers in the following order. There's Dr. Mukoma, Ngugi, Russell Rickford, myself, and then Dr. Zifeng Liu. And before we even get started, I just want to lift up quickly the names of Amandla Thomas Johnson and Mamadou Tall, who, as all of you know, have been under various state repression. And I think it's important for us to acknowledge them, that these types of spaces that are gathering in honor of Black radical scholarship are for them and they are ours. And so it's our responsibility to lift them up and protect them. So that being said, let's go ahead and get started. Ready?
Yep.
All right.
That of course got swindled by the British. Yeah, so we're in Limuru. So we're in Limuru, we are looking at the market. And he's saying this used to be our land. right? And for him, that he has these memories of just being displaced. That he went to high school. When he came back, the whole village had been destroyed, and he had to go look for his family. So the whole idea of losing your home, the whole idea of losing your homeland, the whole idea of not of being exiled in place, really, right? So the poem "I Belong There" reminds me of that. I belong there. I have many memories. I was born as everyone is born. I have a mother, a house with many windows, brothers, friends, and a prison cell with a chilly window. I have a wave snatched by seagulls, a panorama of my own. I have a saturated meadow. In the deep horizon of my world, I have a moon, a bird sustenance, and an immortal olive tree. I have lived on the land long enough. I've lived on the land long before swords turned man into prey. I belong there. When heaven mourns for her mother, I return heaven to her mother. And I cry so that a returning cloud carry my tears. To break the rules, I have learned all the words needed for a trial by blood. I have learned and dismantled all words in order to draw from them a single word: home. The question of home, where do we belong? Where do we come from? The question of now, okay, okay, fine. If I was to rewrite the poem, I would add homes as opposed to just a home, right? You know, the idea of homes, where would having multiple homes and so on and so forth. Could you play the clip? Okay, so but let me give the background. Okay, so yeah, so it was 2 years ago, and we went with CBD to Kenya. And part of it was a renaming of Carole to Washera. So Washera in Gikuyu means one who travels, right? And traveling can be home as well. I actually travel more than anybody I know, quite frankly, actually. like really, like I actually don't even know how you do it. Yeah, no, more than me, yeah. But behind that, it's the question of it's not necessarily return, right? It's more. It's more like it's more a welcoming, right? It's more of a welcoming, like welcome back home, Washera, the one who travels, right? So we'll play the clip. I have a longer clip where you can see CBD breaking it down. It turns out she's a good dancer, but but I have only 15 minutes, so we can play the clip. So could you pause it? Yeah, so the whole renaming ceremony takes place in close to my hometown in Limuru. And of course, amongst the Gikuyu people. So the music that's playing is called Muoboko, which is a Gikuyu traditional music or just Gikuyu music. All right, okay, so watch CBD breaking it down. Okay, I'm enjoying the music too much, actually. Yeah, Amanda left me a message earlier today, right, Amanda, where he said he describes CBD as the epitome or a person who embodies global Blackness, like just in person. So I don't know if you did I send you the photographs? Or? Okay, yeah, but it's only 4 photographs, but but with many stories behind them. So we ended up in Trinidad. It was Liberation Day. Yeah, I know I should share my photographs actually. Yeah. So, but in Trinidad, of course, global Blackness, you know, Trinidad, global Blackness, the whole idea of them celebrating Africa and us being there as well, right? So in a way, so I said something there that maybe doesn't work in the US in the context of US Blackness, right? But I said in Trinidad that I was discovering Blackness there as well, or Africanness there myself, right? As a child of colonialism and so on and so forth. Anyway, that's just CBD styling, really. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. So this is at the stadium. Okay, the next one. Yeah, Eric Williams. Oh, you want to go back to the other? Okay. Yeah, so, but anyway, going back to what Amanda said about Washera or CBD embodying global Blackness, we have done so much work together, right? We're renaming the English department, for example, right? From our English department to literatures in English. But then she goes to Howard and takes it a step further, actually. Okay, CBD became radicalized at Cornell. Okay, but anyway, so she goes and helps rename the English department at Howard, just Department of Literature and Writing. She's part of I work on the Kiswahili Prize. I co-founded the Kiswahili Prize. So she's part of the board of trustees. Anyway, I don't know. Like all I can say is thank you, actually, right? Because I mean, I could talk about her work, but you can also read her books. Yeah. So really, just thank you. Yeah. Yep. So I'll stop there. Yep. Mm.
It's a pleasure and honor to be on this panel with some real kindred spirits. Zifeng did well. I was starting from my far right, a wonderful student, and a brilliant scholar, and honored to have played some role in his development. CBS, Charisse, one of I think the real bright lights of our generation. And my dear brother, Mukoma, we've had some very good times together. But yes, yeah. You know, I got the mic right now, right? Okay. I would, there's many things I can say about Mukoma, but in this particular moment, I do want to take a moment to recognize the work that Mukoma has done and the sacrifices that Mukoma has made on behalf of our targeted students. It's really been tremendous, and we guys are not always acclimated to this kind of work, care work. um, but we're learning, we're trying. And Mukoma really has a tremendous heart, so I'm deeply grateful for him. And apropos of that, during Q&A, I'm going to pass the hat, like I'm going to literally. I'm old school, so I'm going to literally pass the hat um, uh, for for Amandla and Mamadou. Um,
Better pass the, everybody, you need Cash App and Venmo, ain't nobody gonna.
People don't carry
You-
cash.
Oh,
Well, actually, we can do that as well. Can you tell me, love, what is? Okay, yeah, in the Q&A. But Amandla and Mamadou have had to leave the country very abruptly and resettle overseas, and as we know, that is expensive. So we want to help. Um, what an honor to join in honoring CBD, a scholar whose rich oeuvre has done so much to recover radical Black feminist subjectivity and enrich our understanding of internationalism, diaspora, and the global African experience. In the weeks leading up to this gathering, it occurred to me that considering the meaning of CBD's work also requires a re-examination of the praxis of Black and Africana studies. This is an especially urgent task given the monstrous realities that we now face. It seems to me, moreover, that the mighty presence of Claudia Jones is with us today as we both celebrate CBD's contributions and contemplate the grotesque historical moment that has engulfed us. Indeed, I think I can hear Comrade Jones, the Black communist and feminist, asking, sisters and brothers, what is to be done? How can our work as Africana scholars, our teaching, our activism, our knowledge production meet the demands of our time? Revisiting Jones is crucial amid the present conjuncture. What lessons must we draw from a woman who lived in the lion's mouth? A woman who faced the full fury of political reaction, but who never stopped constructing a world beyond white supremacy, capitalism, and patriarchy. None of today's crises, the criminalization of dissent, the assault on Black studies and decolonial epistemologies, the intensification of incarceration and deportation, would have been foreign to Claudia Jones, who was not merely an internationalist and a feminist, but a political prisoner and an exile as well. Perhaps as we enter the final phases of imperial decay, as we face new regimes of authoritarianism and new technologies of detention and banishment, we would do well to re-examine the life of a woman who survived the most harrowing of political assaults, and yet, though far from unscathed, continued to create, to love, to refine marks, and to demand an end to the neglect of the Negro woman. Perhaps what we must rediscover as Black studies workers in the burning house of racial capitalism is a Jonesian methodology of struggle. As we commune this afternoon, as we ponder the historical and contemporary vilification of radical internationalism and the techniques of Black scare, red scare, as per my dear sister CBS, by which the state renders Blackness seditious, subversive, and disloyal, I must acknowledge as well that I feel acutely the absence of Amandla Johnson and Mamadou Tall. These young comrades, easily two of the most brilliant graduate students I've ever had the privilege to teach, find themselves driven overseas and into exile by national and local administrations, national and local administrations that are determined to malign and torment and dragoon anyone who dares condemn occupation and genocide. In keeping with the Jonesian praxis and in light of the persecution of Amandla and Mamadou, I'd like to offer a few tentative musings on the question of Black studies and fugitivity. If we take the long view, we may find that we have been hurtling toward our current crises for some time. The corporate university was bound to collapse. Its most conspicuous accomplishment was the credentialing of a professional managerial elite while the social contract disintegrated. Now, as neoliberalism falters and neo-fascism dawns, the degeneration of higher education accelerates accordingly. This week, Cornell canceled an upcoming performance by Kehlani. Is that right, Kehlani? Kehlani. I don't know anything past like 97. That's when hip hop died. An artist who, I'm just trying to be provocative, an artist who condemned the mass slaughter of Palestinians. The announcement comes amid an ongoing campaign of repression that has witnessed the targeting of Cornell students and staff who refuse to unsee the corpses and who reject the official narratives of Western liberal enlightenment. In recent months, Cornell has platformed far-right trolls. It has welcomed to campus some of the war criminals who helped transform Gaza into an open-air prison, then a mass grave. It arrested or suspended students who had the temerity to heckle colonialists and war profiteers. The campus is becoming a garrison. Administrators act like wardens. Cops and mounted cameras proliferate. Technologies of surveillance and coercion expand as the institutional capacity for care and empathy contracts. Meanwhile, the spiritual decay deepens, a perverse silence spreads. Indifference to suffering is rewarded. The university becomes a zone of sterile conformity. It produces either activists who must face indictment and excommunication, or technocrats who are able to conduct business amid genocide. An institution designed to reproduce class hierarchy now enshrines the principles of securitization and apathy. Perhaps the implosion was inevitable. The academy has long insulated empire. Its discourses of human universalism have always masked the slaughter of the colonial subject. As the structure of the university grew more corporate, the DEI regime arose to reassert the institution's virtue and relevance. DEI was never a tool of deliverance. It was designed to mystify and co-opt the popular demand for racial justice. Remember, liberals prepared the ground. The Obama and Biden administrations enlarged the deportation machine, increased border militarization, revitalized the Cold War, and expanded imperialist aggression in Africa and the Middle East. Now, as global capitalism returns to raw cruelty amid diminishing marginal returns, the ruling class drops the facade. It can offer the masses neither social goods nor symbols of morality. Only systems of punishment and pacification remain. Inexorably, global North populations face the tactics of regimentation and counterinsurgency that imperialism has long practiced in the global South. If you think ICE raids will end with Palestinian solidarity activists, you must be crazy. The ethical deterioration of the university mirrors that of the larger society. As King warned, bombs dropped overseas fall on our heads. We should not be surprised that the colonial war has come home. But we cannot indict the modern university without critiquing ourselves. We are a labor aristocracy amid the casualized workforce of higher ed. We have grown comfortable, complacent. Black studies came to loot the university, to strip its parts, to transfer its resources to the disinherited. Instead, we got comfortable. We found ourselves incorporated. As the academy grew more entrepreneurial, we amassed greater privileges. We internalized the mercenary values of our institutions. Now, as we face in Gaza the greatest moral question of our time, we withdraw into prevarication and liberal centrism. How do we reclaim the insurgent project of Black studies? How do we fashion a people's university that exalts not accumulation, but solidarity, that fosters not careerism, but an ethic of liberation? Perhaps this dark moment is an opportunity. Alienation can be clarifying. Trauma can be clarifying. We don't need martyrs or purists. What we desperately need are new patterns of living and being and working. We need epistemological imperatives rooted in our best traditions of radical inquiry and capable of leading us toward a redemptive human future. As is my wont, I have raised more questions than answers. Let me invoke, in closing, a doctrine advanced by Amilcar Cabral, the West African revolutionary. Cabral described decolonial reconstruction as a process of return to the source, returning to the source. Though he cautioned that the process would be especially difficult for those native elites who have become isolated from the masses, us? How do we return to the source? How do we reclaim the freedom dreams that first brought us to this field? How do we rejoin the cultural past of the Black and brown grassroots, those working folks who will feel the full brunt of neo-fascism, unable to retreat to the cloisters of the academy? How do we live and work in a Jonesian manner, which is to say, with ferocious dignity and integrity, and with our heads in the lion's mouth? Thank you.
Okay. So since they went a little bit shorter, I don't feel bad that my paper is going to be a little bit longer. All right. So I want to start off by just talking about, so I was never a formal student of Professor CBD, but I am perpetually her student because her scholarship and work, what some have called world making, are portals. So I am referred to popularly as Dr. CBS. There would be no Dr. CBS without a Professor CBD. So my own work on Claudia Jones obviously is greatly inspired by Left of Karl Marx and Beyond Containment. And I love that Claudia Jones has sort of become a gateway drug in the sense of opening up people's interests in communism and other radical Black women and anti-imperialism and internationalism. And although there had been earlier writings on Claudia Jones, I think Left of Karl Marx is really what put her like squarely on the map. Then there's different types of work and writings that Dr. CBD does that's really informative and that I think models how we should be moving through academia. So Walter Rodney said that academics are enemies of the people until proven otherwise. And it seems to me that Professor CBD has taken that proven otherwise seriously and has modeled the way that we prove that we are not enemies. You know, she is somebody who makes communities institutionally, but also beyond the institution. Then there's her upright and principled stance. So from that, so I've never been a wait till I get tenure person. I am not tenured, but anybody who knows me knows I say what I need to say all of the time. Because I do think that courage is a muscle and cowardice has a powerful inertia, as we're seeing currently. And so, but when you look to people who are upright and principled and how they move through academia, it steals you in like your own sort of approach. Then, you know, there is sort of staying fly as praxis, looking great. Claudia Jones did it. Professor CBD does, you know, so there's a song by 2 Chainz. 2 Chainz is a rapper. That says, I'm gonna be fresh as hell if the feds watching. And as I was writing about Claudia Jones, I thought about this because the feds were watching her and she was always dressed very nicely. So I have taken that seriously in my own career. So, and then I also say, you know, the connections that Professor CBD makes. So I got the book Left of Karl Marx from Eula Taylor. In fact, I still have Eula Taylor's book. I don't plan to give that back. She asked for it, I'll give it back. And it is signed by, you know, it is signed by Professor CBD. But then that book led me to Sojourning for Freedom. And it was that book by Eric McDuffie that fundamentally sort of shaped the trajectory of my scholarship. And so that's one connection. The other is Zifeng, right? So Zifeng and I have been on several panels together, given the affinities in her work. And, you know, he is very clearly Carole's student, right? And so it's hard to find comrades in academia. And so that's another connection that has been made. And then finally, Claudia Jones, Beyond Containment, is a sort of direct progenitor of Organized Fight When Black Communist Women's Political Writing, which is a collection that I co-edited. And so there's just many ways that I continue to be a student of Dr. Davies. And so I'm just gonna read a bit from a paper that I wrote for the Journal of, what is it, African Languages Association, I think, a while back. That was about Carole, it's called Carole Boyce Davies and Claudia Jones, Radical Black Female Subjectivity and Mutual Comradeship. And number one, I don't think anybody's read this article. I don't know how accessible it is, but also it just, to me, it makes important connections between the work of Professor CBD and Claudia Jones. Professor Carole Boyce Davies has been instrumental in restoring Claudia Jones to her rightful place in Black radical traditions and histories of the Communist Party USA and international communism, and in US Black and transnational feminist thought. As she endeavored to gather, assemble, and share fragments of Claudia Jones, Professor CBD journeyed to feminist, diasporic, decolonial, and transnational spaces, and traversed imperial and post-colonial routes that included London, St. Augustine, Ottawa, Paris, and several other cities. In this way, Jones and Professor CBD can be understood as ideological, political, and migratory fellow travelers. Left of Karl Marx is the first book-length study of Claudia Jones, and Claudia Jones Beyond Containment is the first collection of Jones's theoretical writings. While significant work had been done on Claudia Jones prior to the publication of Left of Karl Marx, Professor CBD's framing of, approach to, and detail about Jones are both exceptional and distinctive. For example, John McClendon, the philosopher, mentions that Jones is, quote, quite appropriately buried in Highgate Cemetery next to the grave of Karl Marx, end quote. He wrote that in '96. And then Diane Langston offered a more detailed description, noting that Jones was, quote, buried next to Karl Marx in Highgate Cemetery, North London, and that 20 years later, the Afro-Caribbean organization erected a headstone which finally recognized Claudia Jones' proper place in history, with this epitaph reading, "Valiant fighter against racism and imperialism, who dedicated her life to the progress of socialism and the liberation of her own Black people," end quote. It was Professor CBD, however, who ascribed historical, ideological, and existential value to Jones's resting place to Marx's left. She wrote, "Jones's gravesite in Highgate Cemetery is a simple flat stone, minus all the power and might of Marx, and easily overlooked by all visitors, not knowing that there is a Black woman left of Karl Marx," end quote. Professor CBD further explains that it was in fact Jones's wish to be buried in this relation to Marx. This revelation of Jones's left positioning, explication of its ideological significance, and vivification of Jones's desire for such placement conveys a special affinity between these two Black progressive women of Trinidadian origin. As Professor CBD understands it, quote, "This project owes everything to the spiritual guidance of Claudia Jones herself, with signs too many to identify. At every step of the way, she made her presence felt in remarkable ways," end quote. And Left of Karl Marx, Professor CBD offers one of the most important conceptual contributions, radical Black female subjectivity. The radical Black subject, she argues, quote, "constitutes itself as resisting the particular dominating disciplines, systems, and logic of a given context," end quote. This subject, male or female, quote, "challenges the normalizing of state oppression, constructs alternative discourse, and articulates these both theoretically and in practice," end quote. Moreover, the radical Black subject resists the domination of systems, states, institutions, and organizations that work to maintain oppression, exclusion, exploitation, and docility. Professor CBD's radical Black subjectivity is palpable in many of her writings. In Sisters Outside, tracing the Caribbean/Black radical intellectual tradition, for example, she interrogates and ventures to rectify the outsider position Black radical women occupy in scholarship about Black and Caribbean intellectual and political traditions. Taking up Kevin Gaines's and Patricia J. Saunders' reading of Left of Karl Marx and drawing on Eric McDuffie's recent work on Black women's radicalism, Professor CBD offers a thick understanding of Claudia Jones's political and intellectual importance in relationship to a number of other Black women thinkers, from Zora Neale Hurston to the Sojourners for Truth and Justice to Angela Davis, to argue that Jones's outsiderness as a woman and as a foreigner allowed her to fundamentally refashion and revolutionize Marxist-Leninist thought. As a radical Black female subject, she moved beyond simply critiquing the work of scholars like Anthony Bogues and Winston James for giving Black and Caribbean women to do the more important work of, let me start over. As a radical Black female subject, Dr. CBD moved beyond critiquing the work of scholars like Anthony Bogues and Winston James for giving Black and Caribbean women short shrift to do the more important work of, quote, giving space and attention specifically to this erased person, Claudia Jones, end quote. And taking seriously Jones as a transatlantic activist, a Black radical intellectual from the Caribbean who revolutionized Marxism-Leninism by addressing issues that Marx and Lenin left unarticulated, Professor CBD not only corrected Jones's erasure, but also offered a framework for understanding and recovering other outsiders. The radical Black female subjectivity that animated Sisters Outside can be gleaned in Professor CBD's piece, piece for the blog Black Perspectives, The Persistence of Institutional Sexism in Africana Studies. Here she upbraids the outsider status of Black women in Cornell University's Africana Studies Department and calls out the institutional sexism manifested in the long line of Black men who have served as its directors. Professor CBD's, listen. Professor CBD's analysis demonstrates that akin to how Jones and other radical Black women had been overlooked in scholarship about Black radical traditions, so too have qualified and committed Black women academics experience intense marginalization in the Africana Studies and Research Center. Though Professor CBD argues that an intersectional analysis is warranted in examining academic institutions like Cornell, it is in fact her radical Black female subjectivity, that is her willingness to critique institutional oppression, to openly challenge material and discursive racial sexual erasure, and to recognize both the personal and systemic forms of multimodal oppression that join her with Claudia Jones in pushing for structural transformation. Indeed, for Professor CBD, Black woman as a mere identity category, Black feminism as a liberal politic, an identitarian intersectional analysis, what we might call identity reductionism and intersectional imperialism, do not evince radical subjectivity. In her important article, Condification, Transnationalism, Diaspora, and the Limits of Domestic Racial or Feminist Discourses, Professor CBD rejects any celebration or admiration of Condoleezza Rice simply because she is a powerful Black woman. She excoriates Rice's application of discourses of Black liberation to imperialist ends, her alignment with corporate internationalism, her ruthless dismantling of ethnic studies and women's studies at Stanford University as part of her efforts to balance the budget, and her overall practice of oppressive politics. Professor CBD's radical Black female subjectivity can be understood as the antithesis of what she calls condification, defined as, quote, the process of intellectuals from oppressed groups who enter the seats of power and then operate with calmness for the benefit of oppression and American imperialism, end quote. Her subjectivity is also then a repudiation of bourgeois Black feminist discourse that calls out various forms of oppression only to gain recognition by or inclusion into structures of domination while dutifully maintaining them. Professor CBD's vehement rejection of Western and US imperialism, which her co-authored article, Imperial Geographies and Caribbean Nationalism at the Border Between a Dying Colonialism and US Hegemony, explicates in great detail, makes her a fellow traveler of Claudia Jones and a foe of Condoleezza Rice. Okay, so I go on to talk about anti-imperialism and Dr. CBD's work on Claudia Jones's anti-imperialism, but in the sake of time, I'll skip over this part. So Jones's radical Black subjectivity is also discernible in the ways, this is okay. I need the other section to transition into this section. See, this is what happens when you don't follow the specified time limits. So I go on to talk about how Claudia Jones recognizes herself. Okay, I'll stick to this part about mutual comradeship. All right, so mutual comradeship can be understood as radical African descendants' ethical practice of collaboration, reciprocal care, and learning in community, rooted in political work on behalf of the racialized, colonized, and oppressed. It entails dedication of time, energy, and resources to radical causes, mutual support for radical organizations, institutions, and periodicals, the provision of jobs and income for persons whose politics deem them undesirable as employees, and protection from and defense against state repression. In this way, mutual comradeship is diametrically opposed to the individualist, exploitative, violent, and dehumanizing values that constitute racialized, capitalist, imperialist society. Mutual comradeship also entails the lateral and intergenerational practice of legacy maintenance, including archiving, commemoration, public remembrance, and truth-telling, predicated upon the enduring commitment to advocacy for and protection of those who, because of their radical praxis, are intentionally erased, obscured, distorted, displaced, silenced, and or hidden from memory. So here it's important to note that Professor Lydia Lindsay, who's a historian at North Carolina Central University, was working on a political intellectual biography of Claudia Jones at the time Professor CBD began her research. And Professor CBD said Lydia Lindsay was generous, helpful, and supportive, even sharing her 1999 unpublished manuscript called Claudia Jones, a Black political theoretician and social activist in the United States and England, 1950 to 1964. And then, so this is cited throughout up to Karl Marx. And so for me, this is the practice of mutual comradeship. It's lifting up the important work that Lydia Lindsay had done and making sure to attribute that work to her. Even though to date, she hasn't published a book on Claudia Jones. So alongside writing Left of Karl Marx and compiling Beyond Containment, the assembling and depositing of the Claudia Jones Memorial Collection at the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture is perhaps Professor CBD's most significant act of mutual comradeship. The latter is underscored by the collaborative nature of this endeavor. Professor CBD was aided by several London comrades, many of who were also comrades of Claudia Jones, including Ricky Cambridge, Diane Langford, and Claudia Machanda. This process of assistance, connection, and relationship building among friends and allies similarly committed to the life and legacy of Claudia Jones is an example of mutual comradeship. So friends pointed Carole to Ricky, who then became her research partner. Another friend alerted Carole to Diane, who was more than willing to share her materials with Carole and her interlocutors. Such collaboration, along with the itinerant and diasporic nature of this journey of discovery, is very much emblematic of Jones's own ethical and political practices. There's a long quote from Professor CBD about the process of depositing those materials. But I'll just skip that part. So mutual comradeship manifests in several ways from this quote. Professor CBD's encouragement of Langford to deposit the papers and in securing the relationship with the Schomburg, and Langford's trust in Professor CBD to carefully shepherd Jones's papers across the Atlantic, and then Professor CBD's steadfast commitment to catalog Jones's legacy, to create the conditions for other scholars to be able to learn about and study Jones, and importantly, to return Professor CBD, to return Claudia Jones to her beloved Harlem. Moreover, in housing the papers at the Schomburg, where the papers of radical Black subjects like Vicki Garvin, Paul Robeson, Lorraine Hansberry, William Matthias Hunton, and Doxy Wilkerson are located, Professor CBD conveyed her ethical commitment to Black history, life, and culture. All right, so by way of conclusion, my own work, including my dissertation, The Modern Capitalist State and the Black Challenge, Culturalism and the Elijah and Political Economy, my article, Constructing Deportable Subjectivity, Anti-Foreignness, Anti-Radicalism, and Anti-Blackness During the McCarthyist Structure of Feeling, and my book, Black Scare, Red Scare, Theorizing Capitalist Racism in the United States, is indebted to the brilliance, courage, and commitment of Professor CBD and Claudia Jones. It is my hope that my own radical Black female subjectivity and practice of mutual comradeship honor the tremendous contributions of the good doctor in much the same ways her scholar activism has embodied the legacy of Claudia Jones. That's it.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's such a great pleasure to be back in this building. And it's a great honor to be part of the celebration of Professor CBD's scholarship and mentorship. I met Professor CBD in 2014 in China. I was a student at a university in Beijing. And Professor CBD came to that university and taught two mini courses in the fall of 2014. And then, of course, Professor CBD taught Claudia Jones and also Caribbean studies, but also Black feminism. While I was preparing this presentation, I then thought that basically Professor CBD was part of this, has been part of this tradition of Black feminist writers and thinkers who practice internationalism. So in the case of China, these were the people and other people who fostered and who have fostered and engaged in exchanges and collaborations with intellectuals, scholars, students in China. In fact, so that tradition of kind of Black feminist engagements with China is basically the topic of my project. So I started to work on that when I came to the US. So I went to Brown, but I was in touch with the Professor CBD. And remember even I shared a paper that I wrote at Brown with Professor CBD, and she was very excited, and she also encouraged me to publish it. And I was still, that was my first year in the US. And then I came to Cornell and had the great fortune to work with Professor CBD and also Professor Russell Rickford. And then, but still, so that's encounter in Beijing and also Professor CBD's classes on Black radical feminism, and in particular Claudia Jones. So that was really the beginning of this project, which I'm still trying to finish. But still, so that project then also led to me studying other people in the same network who were also in the same tradition. So my dissertation, and of course now is a book project, traces the history of the interactions of a network of Black left feminists with Chinese political leaders and intellectuals during the first 3 decades of the post-World War decolonization. And many of those people who are the central figures of my book were introduced to me actually also at Cornell in a course in 2016 called Pan-Africanism and Feminism, developed by Professor CBD. Some of the people who really are like the central figures in my project include Vicky Garvin. And in fact, what Professor Boyce Davies did in Beijing very much resembled what Vicky Garvin did in China. So Vicky Garvin came to China in 1964, and she was in China for 6 years. But between 1964 and 1966, Vicky Garvin taught at a university in Shanghai. And of course, her job was to teach English, but she creatively incorporated Black feminism, or in particular the history of Black resistance in the US into her courses that were meant to basically help students improve their proficiency in English. And other people, other figures also include people like Shirley Gorman Du Bois. And in fact, so the university where I met Professor Boyce Davies, where she taught Black feminism, was the same place where Shirley Gorman Du Bois came and gave a talk on African American literature in 1962. So basically, the point is to show that Professor CBD, of course, is known for her work on Black internationalism herself, also practices that. So as a student, of course, I have intimate knowledge of how she does that as an educator. But of course, that then really is very much my project. So I studied this earlier generation of Black feminists and whose practice of internationalism very much still remind me of what Professor Boyce Davies has been doing for so many years. And in particular, my project is also very much inspired by CBD's work on Claudia Jones. In particular, this project draws inspiration from Professor CBD's work in her critique of the systematic silencing and erasure of Black feminist leftist and international voices, and her reincorporation of these radical perspectives into public memory and a range of academic histories and activist traditions. Because I remember in Life of Karl Marx, Professor CBD writes that that book is not a biography, it's a study. And what that book does for me is to resituate Claudia Jones into many intellectual and activist traditions. So there's a chapter about peace, there's a chapter about Pan-Africanism, there's a chapter about her work in communism. And so what I'm trying to do with my project is to reincorporate people like Claudia Jones into the tradition of Afro-Asian solidarity. And of course, Professor Boyce Davies's work that critiques that silencing inspired my work on to kind of expose and the disappearance, the marginalization of Black radical women in historical and historiographical accounts of third world internationalism, and in particular, the heteronormative masculinist assumptions in those accounts. And also in Life of Karl Marx, Professor Boyce Davies emphasizes that Claudia Jones was an activist intellectual. So, and then of course, right now there has been a lot of discussion. There have many projects that really emphasize Black women's intellectual contributions to many, many fields. So there's a project in the UK called Women's International Thought that basically emphasizes Black women's and other women's contribution to theories of international relations. So I want to focus on one of the central arguments that my book project seeks to advance, which that is the political and intellectual exchanges between Black women activist intellectuals and China were central to refining both Black left feminisms and Chinese socialist conceptions of racism, class exploitation, heteropatriarchal sexism, and imperialism. So those collaborations and exchanges spawned Afro-Asian formations that challenged and at other times accommodated the racial, gender, sexual, geopolitical status quo, both at the national and international level. So on the one hand, engaging Chinese socialism, in particular Chinese socialist state feminism, and integrating China into a global revolutionary alliance enabled Black women radicals to develop new analyses and practices of undoing gender and sexual hierarchies. So basically, people like Claudia Jones and other people were impressed by what they saw when they traveled to China. And they talked about how things had changed since the founding of the socialist regime. But of course, if you read their travel accounts, you can sense that kind of joy that really accompanied their experience in China. But I want to emphasize that so they, beyond relishing lavish accommodations, enjoying breathtaking landscapes and marveling at China's general socio-political economic progress, Black feminists enthusiastically soaked up the ideas of Chinese revolutionary thinkers and the lessons on the history and current state of Chinese socialism and anti-imperialism, and discursively and materially contributed to Beijing's radical political projects. In conversation with Chinese leaders and intellectuals, especially socialist state feminists, Black feminists re-examined the complex interplay of race, class, and gender. What I want to focus is how Black radical women found their efforts to contest the historical and continued capitalist and imperialist exploitation of racialized women's reproductive labor resonant with their Chinese interlocutors' advocacy of what might be called Marxist maternalism, which is a form of women's liberation that stressed physiological gender difference and linked women's equality, maternal health, and family hegemony to the larger project of nation-state building. So I want to talk about that because, so in Eric McDuffie's book, when he discusses Black women's peace activism in the context of US military intervention in early 1950s, so Eric McDuffie says, so their use of maternalist and familialist strategies actually made it difficult for them to develop nuanced analyses of sexuality. But I want to kind of complicate that argument. I want to show that if we consider the longer history of Black women's activism against the exploitation of Black women's reproductive labor in the US, like the work of Ella Baker, Marvel Cook in their work on the Bronx, in this text called The Bronx Slave Market. It's important to emphasize that, that the use of that kind of strategy in which they talk about how women's natural responsibilities as mothers and wives made them, enabled them to make special contributions to anti-war activism. So that in itself actually was a continuation of that kind of activism against the exploitation of Black women's, in particular Black poor women's reproductive labor because they talked about how, of course, this long history of how Black women were denied the access to the fruits of that labor. We think about the work of a generation of Black feminist thinkers. Of course, their work has joined on the activism of the Black women that I study. And then I think in that case, I think it makes sense that that they found that kind of emphasis in China, like the kind of maternal Marxism that focuses on the prenatal and maternal health of women, and also the integrity of family important to their activism. But on the other hand, I want to talk about the circulation and translation of Black feminism into China. So this is also what Professor Boyce Davies did when she was in Beijing. And I also talk about the impact of that kind of work, right? Because people, so when I give presentations, people often ask me like how the kind of impact Black radical women made in China. And I want to offer one example. So in 1963, so Mao Zedong issued a statement in support of Black freedom struggle. So in that statement, that statement they became a kind of war text for kind of African American and Chinese interaction. And then whenever in China people talked about Black freedom struggle, even Black freedom struggles in Africa, they refer to that statement. And then in 1964, a year later, there was a mass meeting in Shanghai commemorating the first anniversary of the issuance of that statement. And then people from all walks of life, representatives of people from all walks of life, were invited to talk about their observations and of course, the significance of that statement. So one of those people who showed up at that meeting was the head of the local chapter of All China Women's Federation. So All China Women's Federation actually was affiliated with the WIDF, Women's International Democratic Federation, which was a socialist internationalist organization. And many of the people that we have talked about, Claudia Jones, Shirley Du Bois, and also Funmilayo Ransome Kuti, so they were all part of that larger network. So basically, the head of the local chapter of All China Women's Federation talked about her understanding of that statement. So what she said was, here it's somewhere here. So she, of course, talked about, so beyond expressing admiration for and excitement at African-American resistance against state repression and preaching the merits of Chinese Communist Party leaders' analysis of US domestic and foreign policy, so this representative traced the history of capitalism exploitation of Black women's productive and reproductive labor, and emphasized that it was such experiences of suffering and depression that prompted them to make leading contributions to the causes of anti-capitalism and anti-racism. More importantly, she highlighted that Black women had integrated their liberation struggle into broader movements against racial oppression and class exploitation. So what she said actually mirrored what Vicky Garvin had been teaching at this university in Shanghai. So Vicky Garvin, in her lectures on the Black freedom struggle in the US, also emphasized, first of all, how gender was an axis of oppression, and how different systems of oppression interacted to produce freedom for Black people in the US. But also, at the same time, talked about the leadership of Black women and throughout the history from enslavement up to the 1960s. So I see these parallels, and I guess what I want to conclude is how the degree to which Black feminists and Chinese social feminists collaborated to kind of and also to incorporate a kind of gendered perspective into this that moment. So that moment was still about that statement, but that statement itself was very much a patriarchal message that did not mention the contribution of women, and so and that statement actually also celebrates the work of Robert F. Williams as kind of charismatic leadership. So in that sense, I want to show that so there was that kind of collaboration, but also Black feminists in China and their collaborators in China were not simply translators, interpreters, or conveyors of the heteropatriarchal state's messages. So together, they reimagined internationalism through underscoring the crucial role of women revolutionaries and linking struggles against sexism, racism, and capitalism. So if, as scholar Tina Chen argues, within the PRC, a gendered globality and everyday internationalism appeared at the core of socialist experimentation. Black leftist feminists participated in ensuring that internationalist, feminist, anti-capitalist, and anti-imperialist connections remained a crucial part of the Chinese public's contemporary vision of global liberation. So I see that kind of a history. I see Professor Boyce Davies' work in China as a kind of continuation of that kind of history that fostered collaboration conversations, and also and that impact still is palpable because now I teach in Hong Kong. So basically, first day of class, I taught water colony. So that was because one of the I can't remember which class, but I remember one of the texts that Professor Boyce Davies asked to read in the first meeting of the class was Groundings with My Brothers. So I taught that. I used that as the kind of foundational text for my students as well. Thank you.
Are we not doing Q&A for this one? No, I don't know. I mean, we don't know. We could take a vote. Yeah.
Hello again. My name is Adrian. I use they, them pronouns, and my question is for Dr. Liu. So I'm intrigued by this question of like the impact that Black women have had on China, its development, its many projects. And I was wondering if you have any thoughts about the situation in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where in particular, American, Belgian, and Chinese mining companies all sort of compete with each other to control, you could say quasi-enslaved, or I would say fully enslaved labor in the region. Yeah, I'm just asking what kind of thoughts you'd have on that as a site where Black women and their actions kind of are extracted to feed into these various projects. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for the question. So Claudia Jones actually wrote about U.S. Interests in the Congo in terms of the mineral resources in the West Indian Gazette and Afro-Asian Caribbean News. But if we talk about China's engagement in Africa at the current moment, it's important to recognize that the China we're talking about now is different from the China that we studied, that I studied in the 60s, right? So, China right now is, like when we talk about the trade war, the reason why there is a trade war, the reason why trade war is not good for China as well, because China is very much deeply integrated into the global capitalist economy. And of course, so what China has been doing is very much similar to other capitalist powers. But then there's also a consensus among scholars working on China in Africa that it is important to develop critical perspectives on China, but it's also important to distinguish what China is doing in Africa from that, or the whole history of European colonialism in Africa as well. Because simply calling China a new colonial or colonial presence in Africa seems to whitewash the long history of like kind of Euro-American colonial brutalities in Africa. Yeah, but it's a great question, but I think you know, like people have been talking about this. So there's a film. I'll just use that film as an example called Neptune Frost. That film actually has an interesting critique of mining interests, China's and U.S. mining interests in Africa. So I think it's quite obvious. So I hope that answered the question.
Didn't want to press the head. And
Open your purses. We prefer the kind that folds, but we'll take the kind that jingles. Thank you. People want to see me for. No, just give them money. Run it.
Like church tradition.
Yeah, thank you.
So this is to support Amanda and Mamadou as they get resettled. Any little bit helps. So if you got a little bit, you can drop it in a hat.
Okay, Venmo is Clay, ACLAY-6. It's also QR code if you want to come see me during a break.
ACLAY.
-6.
Is it underscore?
No, it is not. It is a hyphen. It is a dash.
ACLAY. Okay.
And there's a QR code because, you know, that's how we do.
Please give generously.
Yeah, to go with what Russ was saying. Okay, so both Amanda and Mamadou, they also some of the best, most brilliant students I've ever taught, right? So in a way, it's as if we are killing our future, right? But all they did was to talk about a genocide. You know what I mean? Like we're punishing people who are speaking their conscience, but also punishing our future. And that, I think that one for academia, that one we just have to refuse. That one we have no choice. Yeah, yep. On that note, I'll see you guys later.
We don't need to belabor the point. Thank you.
So we'll have the next panelists come up, and after that, we will have food. So we'll get through the next one. Check, check.
Well, I guess,
About that join because he's collaborating. Let's see if he wants to. Yeah. No? No? No, I was trying to get him to join, but he doesn't want to. Huh?
she's supposed to.
She was here earlier.
Maybe she stepped out and done. Yeah.
And then Marcy. I can do that. I can do that.
And by introducing whom?
Marcy, the poet.
Oh, okay. Uh-huh. So wonderful to see your family, Carol.
I know, they're all grown up. Have you seen the babies?
Yeah.
Yeah. She does. The little boy is hers. He's somewhere. He's with the dad, maybe walking around. He's the youngest. So he's a bit disadvantaged. The girls treat him like he's little. I was like, yeah, but he's a cute little brother.
I didn't see him. Because he was shy away.
He's outside walking with the dad. So we're waiting for injury, right? We're waiting on injury. Hi, everybody. What we want to do is just have a closing discussion about collaborative work. So if you can, anybody outside, ask them to come in, we'll be grateful. I don't know which order we're going in. Maybe we start with you. Yeah, because you were the first. There's no real structure, but it's a round table, a long table. But we're gonna go in order of work, collaborative work that we have done together over the years. And I told Ann Adams she was the first of that group. So maybe Ann can start. Yeah, Janelle, there's Gigi back there. Yeah. They were looking for you, Gigi.
I just want to start by putting my perspective on this whole occasion. My perspective on this whole occasion is, I hope that Howard University appreciates what Cornell is giving up for them. I mean, having said that, however, as an alumna myself of an HBCU, I am glad that an HBCU is getting Carole. I mean, Carole has, as we've heard, left her footprint here at Cornell, and a very big footprint it is, as we are, as we've heard. But many of the people who have made fabulous presentations today are relating to Carole's work as inspiration for them, and Carole as a mentor and so forth. My perspective is different. We go back almost 50 years. Almost 50 years, yeah, right. One of us has gray hair to show for it. Anyway. Anyway, and so, but I have to say that what a lot of people have said about what Carole has given to them and has shared with them is in keeping with the collaborative work that that she has initiated and been involved in, because she initiated this book that she invited me to co-edit with her. We published it in 1986. And we sort of outdoored it at the UN Decade for Women meeting in Nairobi. It was, it's Ngambika Studies of Women in African Literature. And just to share how far scholarship and movements have come since then, when we started in the early 1980s to look for, well, we had no trouble finding scholars, collaborating scholars to contribute articles on women in African literature. So it included women writers as well as male writers whose treatment of women's issues and women characters was worthy of our book. And we wanted a title for it. So we had the table of contents, and the working title we had was Feminism in African Literature. And we wanted the term in an African language. So I remember at a meeting of the African Studies Association, where I guess there are about 1,000 people who attend the ASA meetings. We took our little write-up of the table of contents and the working title, Feminism in African Literature, around to African colleagues and said, this is the book we've put together. Can you give us an expression from your mother tongue that means this, feminism in African literature? To a person. They said, there's no such thing. We don't have that. Of course, we knew they did, but their perception of feminism was Western and anti-male. And what we had come to understand as African feminism, and Carole's introduction in the book, which is cited many, many times, lays out our understanding of African feminism. So finally, in our frustration about finding a title, we deleted the wording feminism in African literature and just showed people the table of contents, told people what the articles were about and so forth. And then we got responses. The responses, essentially, the one that we chose came from, it's a language that's spoken in Zaire, in Congo, I know, but I don't remember which one it is, yeah. Huh? Chiluba, okay, Chiluba, thank you. And essentially, it means help me to carry this load. So thinking of African women communalism and so forth, and cooperation, collaboration, help me to carry this load is just what we were hoping for. And so the cover image has an image that is so frequently seen, especially in rural areas. But the point is that the woman who is going to carry the load of wood on her head needs her sisters to help her bear it, to help her get it up onto her head, and then she goes forth with it. So this kind of help me carry this load, help me bear this load, is the essence of, that's not a good word to use, but is the germ of African feminism as we understand it, and as it is discussed in our book. And I think if you were to read Carole's elegant explanation of African feminist theory from 1986, you would see how applicable it is today. So I will leave with that anecdote.
So basically, Anne has done a really great summary of the process. But just so you know, and Kasahun Chikol, who is the publisher, is not here. Unfortunately, he could not rearrange his schedule. But I would stay, and I still do, in my office kind of after everybody's gone so I could finish up things. And he was making a sort of tour because he had been a part of the Wallacenian structure at Binghamton. And it was just sort of seeing who was there. Now, before that, and this is the most important part, I had sent about 27 or more letters to publishers with the idea of doing this book. And they all were like, this is fine, but we don't do that kind of thing. So just letting you know that works, now many publishers have a special series where they do African work, but back then they did not. So we got all this lovely response, great, but we don't really do that. So then Kasahun came through Binghamton that evening, just walking around to see who was still upstairs on the 13th floor. And I was there, and he said, well, I'm a publisher. And I said, oh, we have a book. And he was just starting his press. And I think this ends up being like number 3, right? It's very early in the line of Africa Will Press works. So just letting you know, Cassian Chikola and Africa Will Press, and we've said this in African Studies last year, he has been really formidable in at least cornering a market that was missing, and that has really provided, many people got tenure because of Cassian, because their works were made available and present and so on. So just letting you know that context. So that was the first major work. And I wanted just to say something because I've done a lot of collaborative collections, because in my framing, intellectual framing, this is one of the ways that a field grows. And I learned from people like Barbara Smith and all the other women who had done, like, you know, Hal Scott and the others and Smith, but some of us are brave. The logic of doing collaborative work for Black feminism has been really fundamental in creating a library of materials. So this is part of that process. We had also gone to African literature conferences and had different panels where we presented to a lot of African men shouting us down. You have to know that. Oh yeah, they would be like, oh, this is nonsense, we don't do this. We were always fighting them. So I mean, I learned to fight back intellectually in those arenas. And the thing is, the structures of African literature back then, which were pretty much run by a guy named Bernd Lindfors, you couldn't really get published either in research in African literatures. He never published our work. And people would talk about it privately and say, you know, how do you get published? So we had people presenting work at conferences, but not having a space for them to be put together. So actually, of one of the feminists, Binghamton, we had a really nice group of white feminists who really mentored many of us who were just beginning as scholars, and showed us, you know, this is what you do, this is how to do your CV, this is how you do this. And there was a group that was like that were really politically clear about how to advance generations of intellectuals. And one of them said, well, why not publish them, create an anthology and publish them? And that's how this book came to be and put together from these conferences. But you have to know, including people like Haile Garima, and I challenge Haile now when I see him. He was one of those who was shouting us down that there's no such thing as women, all African women already have rights, you all don't need it, this is Western, this is that. I remember one guy attacking Dalmida because she had done a paper on prostitution in African lit. And he, using works like in Ngugi and so on. And he said, when he responded, "Thank you for your prostitution." It was like that. It was hardcore.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So Femi Ojoade, I call their names because they, I mean, they were pretty public. And Elaine was reminding me, this is a really classic story. Oekanu Omoyela, really lovely man. He was asked by a press to put together a collection of African literature, history, literary history. And he had everything, Lusophone, Francophone, theater, drama, poetry, whatever. But the press told him, "You have nothing here on women. Can you give us something like that?" He goes to Elaine to tell her if she can do it. Elaine comes to me and says, "I don't feel comfortable being a white woman and they're asking me to do this. Would you do this with me?" So this is my colleague here, and you have to know this is why we ended up being able to work that long, because she recognized the sort of hierarchy involved in some of the African male practices, where they would go to white women to do certain things and get them published, and we were doing the work. We were the ones that were getting published. So that, I'm just sort of giving you context to how we did a lot of the collaborative work, which you see coming out now. So Elaine is the next
Okay.
book up. So we can
All
talk
all
about
right,
that.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, I always feel the outsider and grateful to be in any way on the, even on the print on the inside. So I'm grateful to be here and to tell this story. As someone said to me the other day, "You're a walking archive." And I said, anybody who gets up to a certain age and doesn't lose their memory and has done things is a walking archive. So I think that's what we're doing here. Yeah, out of the Kumbla came about, Carole and I talked about this at Amherst a year or so ago. I had an essay in Nambika. So one thing led to another, because I was in Barbados at UWI and Carole was in Binghamton. And of course we knew each other. And so Gender and Development Studies, as it came to be called, was actually started as Women's Studies at the University of the West Indies at that time. The university told us, "You can do this." All women, of course, doing it. "You can do it, but you're getting no time and no money." So we did it as extra. All the teaching, all the development and everything else, eventually got outside grant funding and embarrassed the university into making it permanent, and it's thrived ever since. So in that moment, thinking about women in the Caribbean, and women writers were just coming up so much at the time, it seems it's a natural thing to do. And so that's what Carole and I set out to do with Kumbla. But people don't believe this now. But it happened with, well, you were close together in Nambika, with thousands of miles apart. It's before the internet, right? That means phone, fax, mail. That's all we had. And so we had to figure out how to make a reasonable collection of essays that covered whatever ground we could. Reaching people was extraordinarily interesting. So Carole's here and I'm there. So we have each have a sort of neighborhood to go to. Not all the people we asked were in our neighborhood, but mostly they were. And then we had to figure out how to get the book together. And so somehow it happened. But I just wanted to say something about collaboration itself, because that's what Carole asked me to talk about. And I was thinking last night that I grew up in Britain thinking that the word collaborator was just awful because it meant traitor in the French resistance. And of course, Josephine Baker was magnificent in the French resistance, using all of her celebrity to do this underground work. But so collaboration was not a good thing. And I was thinking last night that collaborating with Carole has been such a blessing and such a learning curve for me as well, and has just made me decide that that word, like any word actually in the language, depends entirely on your ethical use of it. So if you determine that you have an ethical purpose and you're trying to collaborate to that purpose, that's, I think, what makes it work. Because I honestly don't remember, and we didn't agree about everything. And we still don't we have different views about things. I don't remember us ever having an argument that wasn't resolved in that word. Do you? You can't remember? You can't remember? Oh, no. I mean, we disagree, but we didn't have a fight. Or we didn't stop it. We didn't do it. We resolved it. And that is, I think, the true nature of collaboration. And to go back to just this other thing I want to talk about for a moment, that I think you have done such enormously important work in combining the intellectual and creative, which should never have been separated in the first place. A lot of that has to do with the nature of the way universities are set up and the kinds of work that has been inherited, the sort of pressures to do work in certain ways. And one of those pressures is individualism, which is highly capitalist, and doesn't allow for collaboration. So one of the things we ran into, I don't think either of us suffered. I don't know, you're part of this, right, Carole, but I don't, we haven't suffered in the long run. But what could have been really disastrous is that when we collaborated, first of all, we're women, and women's work at that time is less valued outside women's space in general. Secondly, we're collaborating, and the university's attitude is, you want promotion? How do we know who did what? We can't evaluate this. This is irresponsible. You must stop this. So the political and social affirmation is the word I need that I have for this kind of collaboration was undermined by the very system that we all work in, which is why I was so deeply attracted to the world I'm here. Because if it's nothing, an ethical collaboration is what it is, all the way down the line. So the last thing I want to say about this is that that essay that we wrote for IECAN, right? I actually printed it out. I found it. I moved house. It was in a remote box in the garage, and I found it last week. And I haven't read it forever. So I opened it up, and I couldn't tell which of us wrote which parts. Sorry?
African literature of the 20th century.
It was African literature of the 20th century, and we wrote on African women writers. So I should say that I had taught at the University of Ghana for a few years, and I was at Ibadan for a while, and so I did write. That's how I had a piece in Nambika. But so we wrote on African women writers, and it was a literary history. So we could afford to have a pretty objective tone. This is what happened, this is what happened. We divided it into sections and genres and so on, and we just went down the line with it. But when I was rereading it the other day, I can't tell what's your voice and what's mine.
She did theater and poetry. I remember that.
Yeah, I would have done theater and poetry, and you would have fiction. But the tone of it is just, I think I might have, maybe not. Yes, I did refer to this. So in the essay, written this, in the essay, the pronoun we appears only in the last paragraph as a collective. We should tackle critical prejudice for what it is, which is speaking to the reader, right? It doesn't say it's two of us. And in the last sign-off, there is a sign, in the last sentence, there is a sign-off from the two of us. These women writers struggle to express their reality with honesty, with complexity, and with concern for their societies. We honor that effort. That was but it was just the last sentence, and the rest of it, you can't tell. There's no different voices. This would freak out most promotional committees. For me, though, it is a high achievement. And I'm very proud to have been part of it. So thank you, Carole, again, for all of it. So much.
So I wanted Morineke to be here because Morineke is part of a group of women. In African Literature Association, we created something called WOCALA, Women's Caucus of the African Literature Association, precisely because of what happened with the guys attacking us. So and that caucus is still strong and still going, and has subsequently produced many different versions of what we did, more advanced, more contemporary. I should say though, whenever I go to like places like South Africa, people still come out with this and ask me to sign. I'm like, yeah, but this is like 1985. They're like, yeah, but this is my book, because I need you to sign. So it's really fascinating that even though it's that long, it still has a certain kind of movement in when you go on the continent.
Carole, we should mention the second Kumbla
Yes, well, when we come back.
when we come back.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Morineke is one of that group of intellectuals who knows exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah. Intellectuals, yes.
An activist, a politician.
Yeah.
You're a politician.
I'm a commissioner and city commit and vice mayor of my city, so I'm busy.
Oh, you all need to know another thing about Morineke. In my yard in Babakai is my partners in the back there. In my yard, I have a lot of banana trees growing. And when they bear, I have all these, there's like big hand of banana. I don't know what to do with it. And Morineke said, send it to me. So I go to the post office and I put them in one of them boxes, the priority boxes, and I send them to Morineke. So any banana that she's serving in her house is coming from my yard. I know she sent me back some flowers that I should grow in my yard, and they did not grow, not one of them. Well, it's a different kind of, Miami is a rough weather and soil and everything.
Bananas. I get the bananas, I sent her peonies, and because they need cold weather, so, but we talked about that. I said, you know, yeah. I also sent her maple syrup from my area. Yeah, like fresh maple syrup. First of all, I want to say I am really happy that I'm here, and thank you for inviting me. I want to say I appreciate you. I love you, you know, it's just beyond appreciation, right? There are people that you encounter and you want to say you're grateful to the universe for sending them your way, right? And so my sister here, so I get to claim her. My sister, Carole Boyce, doctor, professor in the Nigerian way, right? You know, Queen, you know, I need another title for her. Here, you know, I am grateful that, you know, you came my way in various ways. So, you know, I was saying to my friend here earlier that, you know, I really don't want to read this because I've written it so many times, and some of the things that I want to say, people have already said. But what I'm going to try and do is maybe read a section of it and then talk about the rest of it. So I, you know, just so that I can place myself within, you know, first of all, I am a bit discombobulated because I arrived here at about 1-something a.m. And by the time I went to bed, it was 2:30 a.m. And my alarm went off at 5:30 a.m. So this is, yeah, so that's what you're getting. So I came to know Dr. Carole Boyce Davies' work through the African Literature Association, where she was active as one of the preeminent African or Black women literary scholars in the 80s. In fact, in many ways, I consider her as one of the 4 voices of Black feminist scholarship, especially on African diaspora women writers and literature. I acknowledge that Alice Walker, Audre Lorde, Hortense Spillers, Patricia Hill Collins, you've heard the names, they were already working in the area of Black feminists, or what Alice Walker would refer to as womanist, you know, theory or criticism. The problem, however, was that they were not looking at African women. And so there was that gap. And that's where my 2 sisters here, Anne Adams and Carole Boyce Davies, would step in. And so that's where I'm going with what I'm trying to say. Well, it turns out that you started talking about Ngambika because I framed my conversation beginning with this, you know, Ngambika. So I say Carole Boyce Davies would play a critical role in bringing the representations of African women's lives and writing into focus, particularly in African literary studies, Furthermore, although there were several authors writing and commenting about African literature, the voices of African women writers and scholarship about them were missing in a white male-dominated field. Yes, we had African Literature Association. Sorry, my dear sisters and brothers and friends here, that particular association was dominated by white male scholars.
It was true.
And she mentioned one of them. In fact, there were hardly any Black women scholars of African women's writing whose works were foregrounded or published, as you heard from her. African women were missing in the leadership positions of many of the scholarly organizations focusing on Africa. They were not at the ASA and not at the ALA, okay? So when Carole Boyce Davies and Anne Adams Graves, that's the name you were using then, published their collaborative edited work, Ngambika, Studies of Women in African Literature, they established the foundation for many of us to begin to talk about African women's literary productions and representations. They were challenging what Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie would say or describe as the single story about African women's lives, images, and literary productivity. It is in this space of groundbreaking or foundational, innovative, transformative, and transformative has been used so many times that I thought I need to strike it off my piece, right? But I'm not. Transformative, anti-colonialist, anti-imperialist, radical Black feminist, canonical work that I locate Carole Boyce Davies, okay? So I'm gonna really work hard not to read all of this, but just please bear with me. Okay? I'm a storyteller. Shall I continue?
Continue.
All right. This is where I locate my encounter with her collaborative work, because this collaboration with Anne Adams Graves, I'm gonna just use the name that appears there, would birth one of, if not the first collection of essays dealing with the representation of women in African literature and focusing also on male and female writers. They did not exclude the male writers, but they were looking at the ways, the essays were also looking at the ways in which women were represented in works by male writers.
Can't leave out Ngugi.
Of course, or Shoinka or Achebe, seriously, the earth will come down or the sky will fall. Just, something will open up and Ogun would emerge. Did I say that? All right, okay. So therefore, it was logical for me to turn to Carole Boyce Davies to write the preface to my edited collection, Emerging Perspectives on Tess Osonye Onweme in 2023. And that book was also published by Kasahun of Africa World Press. I did not have to think about who to ask. In her preface to Emerging Perspectives, titled Authoring Lives, Telling Women's Stories of the African Experience, Carole Boyce Davies writes about teaching Onweme's play, Shakara, Dance Hall Queen, and her African-American students' reception of the play. What is poignant about her preface is her connection, as she often does, of the work to its many origins or sources across the diaspora, and the role of women in that performative space of dance hall. She writes, quote, claiming dance hall, a female-dominated urban performative space as a space of creativity and resistance in Africa, offered points of connection to Caribbean and African-American students as it demystified the romanticized version of Africa that is popularly peddled in some African diaspora contexts. For me, unquote, for me, she adds, quote, as a scholar of African and African diaspora literatures, this bold and well-crafted work is in many ways emblematic of the kind of innovation that Onweme continues to offer. One might say that Carole Boyce Davies also does the same thing. She is the embodiment of the world African diaspora, as we have, we have heard. We have heard her, described as representing a global Blackness. As one of the women scholars of the African Literature Association, she would also collaborate with other figures, including Abena Busia, and Adams Graves here, Irene D'Almeida, Irene D'Almeida, Eileen Julian, Molaro Ogundipe Leslie, to mention a few, to establish the African Women's Caucus, and that's what she was referring to as WAKALA. It would, the acronym is WAKALA, which is the Women's, what is it? Caucus of the ALA, right? So on the webpage of the ALA reads, quote, in 1989, during the annual meeting of the African Literature Association held in Dakar, Senegal, a group of women members of ALA met to discuss the necessity of formalizing, it's like a contract, right? Yeah, we had to formalize women's relationship with the African Literature Association. This is serious business, right? Of formalizing the relationship between a women's caucus formed in 1988 and the organization at large. I mean, what legalistic language? The contract, right? Seriously, right? Among the attendees at this meeting were incoming ALA President Ann Adams, past President Mildred Hill Luben, and future Presidents Eileen Julian, Abena Busia, Irene D'Almeida, and guess who? Carole, Boyce, Davies, right? And Thelma Ravel Pinto, right? So Professor Davies became WAKALA's first president and later the ALA's president, right? Actually, I was the first secretary of WAKALA, but it doesn't show up on the webpage. I am protesting. Yeah. Yes, yeah. I protesting. Yeah. Yeah, right. I was. WAKALA and its work will serve as evidence of Carole Boyce Davies's commitment to transformative and collaborative work. WAKALA not only brought women into leadership position in a previously dominated male African Literature Association, but also created space for African women scholars to engage in networking within the association and across the African diaspora literary landscape. In fact, at the time of its establishment, only 3 of the 16 presidents of the ALA were women. 3 of 16. It's not even 1/4, not even 25%. That is painful, right? So the next section that I talk about deals with WAKALA's goals. And, those goals actually align with the work that you do a lot, So I'm just going to skip this whole section, so that I'm not going to make you all sick from reading this. But for me, therefore, Carole Boyce Davies, in terms of her scholarship and, her theorizing of Black women's lives provided me and a lot of us with a model for contemplating and actually engaging in the work that we do today. So in many ways, you would be more like my literary, big sister.
Okay, I'll take that.
Excellent. Really? No, seriously, right? Yeah, excellent. Absolutely.
I was gonna say like auntie or something.
No. Godmother, yeah. No. Let's go with big sister.
Big sister better. Big sister better.
No. We stay with big sister. Yeah, me too. I like that. Okay, all right. You see how, I know, so it tells you how close we are really, apart from the bananas. So I talk about Ngambika, but, yeah, she's done a good job about that, so I'm not going to talk about it. But I wanted to actually, there's a section where I talk about the reception, at least, of Ngambika, where some of the scholars of African literary studies at that time were looking at it. So I'm just going to read one to you, and then I'll move away from that. So in a review of this edited collection, which is Ngambika, Gay Willens notes that the title of this collection may also suggest the commitment, quotes, the commitment of both male and female critics of African literature to share the task of exposing the writings of women to readers and examining in a feminist context of family, exclusively male, maybe it's formally, exclusively male canon of African literature. Interested readers have been hard-pressed to find the existence of women writers, unless they were white, in the critical works of African literature. It was a word-of-mouth transfer, and it still is to an extent. There has been a concerted effort on the part of publishers as well as critics to help balance the load in terms of availability and discourse on women writers in Africa. Ngambika is a significant addition to the dialogue on African women writers and the role of women in African literature, unquote. All right, so, and I said, her work is transformative, right? So, and this is, Carole Boyce Davies's works have been transformative, paying attention and giving voice to the continuities between continental Africa and our diasporic communities, both as geopolitical landscapes and the subjects of scholarship. It seems to me that Davies is engaged in scholarly resistance, shifting the field of scholarship from a Eurocentric and male-centric paradigm to a pan-Africanist or pan-diasporic and Black feminist paradigm. So we can hear echoes of this paradigmatic shift in other works, including but not limited The African Diaspora, African Origins and New World Identities, co-edited with Isidore Okpehu and Ali Mazrui. Decolonizing the Academy, African Diaspora Studies, which I think sounds like an homage to Ngugi's decolonizing, or maybe a critique of Ngugi's decolonizing the mind. It could be an homage and a critique too. I don't know, whichever one, Okay, extension of Ngugi's decolonizing the mind, and perhaps Frantz Fanon, right? Were you thinking of him when you were doing that too? Great, you see what I mean? Okay, so a blurb on the goal of this work says, quote, this collection of essays argues that African diaspora theory has the possibility of interrupting the current colonizing process and re-engaging the decolonizing process at the level of the mind, as emphasized by Ngugi wa Thiong'o in an earlier contribution, right? So now I'm closing, okay? So closing, Black women's rights is another piece that she's written. Black women's rights, leadership, and circularities of power. So in this case, of course, we're looking at, political landscape, there's a shift, but I like the diasporic nature again of, of this particular work, which again talks about continuities and similarities and in the ways in which we actually expand the study of Black women, right? So Angela Davies says about this work, Carole Boyce Davies always escorts us across the geographical borders that routinely impede the development of global engagements with transformative ideas, especially theories and practices generated by Black women, unquote. And then, of course, praising her work, this particular work, Paul Temba Zeleza says, quote, Carole Boyce Davies is an exceptional international and interdisciplinary scholar who has written an extraordinary book on Black women and political leadership in the Pan-African world. Erudite, engaging, and conceptually rich, she brilliantly critiques and celebrates women's struggles, achievements, and aspirations in the constructions and circularities of power. It is a compelling read and represents a major contribution to studies of leadership that tends to be Eurocentric, and here he says male-centric. So I'm going to end by saying, each time I think of Carole, no, I mean, I'm not kidding. I think about you and I think about Judy Mowatt's song, right? The one, it says, what does it say, never get weary, never get weary. We've been down in the valley for a long, long time. We will never get weary. She never gets weary, and she tells us we should never, ever get weary. Thank you. Okay.
Oh, look at me. So my colleague, contemporary, and most recent collaboration, but we collaborated in many more ways than this book. We were like always two of the women really struggling with the very male leadership in Africana for at least 20 years. More than for you, more for sure. And so sometimes we were just like, oh my, I can't believe they said that in a meeting. Really, I mean, we have stories. We just go to her office and we'd be like, can't believe this. But this is my colleague, partner in crime, and I really miss her. Over the years that I've been here at Cornell, she has been an amazing ally. The major thing is that she, Indri, y'all need to know this, she sometimes works around the clock. So I don't know the where he is, I never get where he is over there too. I'd be like, Indri, you're still in the office, and I'll be still there too, so. But I'll be going home and she'll be still there, so. Anyway, Indri is my colleague, and we work together on Pan-African Connections, which was actually a testament to a colleague who retired a few years ago, Loxley Edmondson. Indri, please.
Oh, well, what can I say at this time after all those things that have been said? But so I think I was right in saying instead of reading a paper, I would like to tell a story, how we met all the way to now. Because of the nature of the work we do, even before coming to a space like Africana Studies, that is multidisciplinary, I was already interested in what was being done in other fields, so-called traditional field, that could have a meaning to my own work. So I was aware of Professor Boyce Davies's work before we formally met. When did we meet? We met 34 years ago when I was a Fulbright Senior Fellow here at Cornell. She was still at Binghamton University. But the Black women here, Professor Ann Adams, Professor Margaret Washington here, and others, they had created a space of Black women network. And I think you acknowledge that in your book, Caribbean Spaces.
Excuse me, please allow me to say this because I've never had an opportunity. Yes, we had a Black women's faculty group. I don't know if we ever settled on a name, but the name I wanted, my sisters rejected. It was called Girls in the Hood.
By the time I came, I wasn't aware of all these discourses. I was just happy to join a group of Black women scholars. And I was then commuting. My husband was teaching at Vasa and the children were there. And I was supposed to be here for only 9 months. So I was commuting and coming to Africana Studies. To Ithaca, there were many things that excited me. First of all, I had the opportunity of going to either Harvard or Columbia, Radcliffe and what is the Urbana, because my work was on women. But I chose to come to Africana Studies. And so coming back to Africana Studies was like, there's a joy, like a home. That was a specific event, that meeting in the home, we were not physically in the hood somewhere, but we were in the home of one of the women. It gave me a wonderful, wonderful experience in starting here, doing my own work. So I want to use the opportunity to thank all those women who did that work and welcoming us. So this is where I met Carole. She was coming from Binghamton. And then I have a few pictures in my office as my Professor Washington. Wow. One she likes is one of the one you like is with Winnie Mandela, my picture with Winnie Mandela. And there is this one here, 1992, with Carole.
Wow.
Carole, me, Chinyere Okafor, and a Brazilian sister at a conference here, 1992.
Can I pass it to Carole?
Yes, here.
I'm not taking
And so I was always saying, oh, wouldn't it be nice if she could join us? But I was not in a position to make any decision. And when Professor Adams decided to retire, I said, oh, wouldn't it be great to have both of them? But if Professor Adams has made her mind, she's leaving, it will be great to have Carole. And so this is the way, the context in which I was so excited when you came here. And then we have had the opportunity of doing, as you said, many, many things. I had a conversation with the sister, Patricia McFadden, whom you know, about the notion of liberated space. We can't have liberated space within the global system, the way it is organized, the way it is worked. The power system, even when it's not visible, it has its representatives in the space to do the work. However, there are ways you organize to do your own, to create your own moment to advance. So this is the way we have been working together. I want to just point to a few activities that we had the opportunity of carrying out together. We worked on, no, let me say this. When you meet Carole in different spaces, what is remarkable is that she doesn't change her story. She doesn't change the way she analyzes issues. So going to Haiti together when you were the president of the Caribbean Studies Association, or meeting in Dakar where at the CODESRIA, the Council for Social Science Research in Africa, that institution was created by a great mind, Samir Amin. He was very revolutionary, as you know, but he was created opportunities by being connected to the United Nations. And he wanted to create a space for training for in Africa. The UN was insisting that he should organize practical training. Samir Amin refused. He said, we need a space for thinking. Even if the training is connected, we don't put these things in small drawers. However, we need to have a space for critical thinking. And so this is how CODESRIA was created. However, despite all the work that CODESRIA did, there was that gender problem. They housed the award, Professor Adams Association of African Women for Research and Development. That was created by a group of extraordinary African women, Philomena Stidi, Achola Pala Okeyo, and others, who said they were tired of seeing the pictures of African women on other people's books without the perspectives of African women. And actually, in parentheses, that one led to my problem here at Cornell when I was connected to Women's Studies, now FTSS. They wanted me to be the picture, the black face, without a story, illustrating their notion of Black women as voiceless, as invisible. So I will line up far, far behind, and they will speak for me. When they found out I had a voice, and I was not going to repeat that way, that what they wanted me to repeat, it became a problem. So these are some of the issues we were raising also on the gender basis with CODESRIA. And I was already here when I went to that meeting that led CODESRIA to publish this book after we made the presentation, Engendering African Social Sciences. And then Codesria had also a space for award, Association of African Women for Research and Development, as I was mentioning. And the relationships were a reflection of the contradiction, the gender contradiction that they were engaged in their own works. So meeting Professor Boyce Davies there, the message, the engagement, the scholarship, the argument, you see the consistency. And that's one of the things that I want to really acknowledge. So a few of the things that we did together, just mentioned, when Professor Loxley Edmondson retired, we organized together, really with a lot of passion, this conference that led to this book, Pan-African Connection, which we could use also for Professor Boyce Davies adding the gender struggle. You also joined, we created Professor Margaret Washington and Professor Josephine Allen, the first Black woman to be tenured at Cornell. Isn't it a shame? She's still alive, happily. The first woman, Black woman to be tenured at Cornell. Wow. So they created, we together created that Black Women Forum. And we didn't want to create a gap between the faculty members and the staff. So it was working well. The president, who was kicked out after 2 years, he was the one who understood us. He came to our meeting. And by the time Professor Boyce Davies came, the other president, Scotton, he was here. Remember one of the meetings, Scotton was there, the provost was there. It was, you wonder, what's going on? What are we doing that is considered to be wrong for all of them to be here? We found out, we found out that uniting faculty and staff with a commitment to the student was going to be a problem. So they worked very hard to break it down. But these are some of the things that we were working on. So as I said, I wanted to just mention a few things. And when Winnie Mandela left this world, Carole and I organized in the same building, same room, a recognition. The thing is, as she mentioned, since my children became big and independent, I worked late. Even when they were young, I'll go home, they'll go to bed, and then I come back. And we had the opportunity of discussing. She will pop up in my office. I will pop up in hers. And what's a major issue, whether it is global, international, national, institutional, we would have the time to discuss. And I would not have any fear that if I say ABC, she will go and report me in one or the other. So this is the kind of colleague, you have that confidence that you can discuss all the contradictions of this place. So one thing that, Carole, why are you leaving us? Yes, you need it.
HBCU needs her.
Yes.
Yep. That's true. That's true. I actually, we organized this on HBCUs. So I value it, but we need to continue to create the small spaces. And so, yes, you need it there. But the point I'm making is that you need it in many, many more places. And you have, So I would like to not to I would like just to end it here to say that it's not because we are on the same floor, but it's because we're on the same page. on many things.
That's.
Finally, Elaine and I wanted to just say that we're doing we have been, oh my goodness, it's been a lot of work, working on an updated version of Out of the Kumbla. Actually, Lisa, please stand up, because Elaine hasn't seen who you were. Elisa was one of the grad students who worked on the bibliography. Basically, the Sylvia Winter essay, those of you who know Sylvia Winter's work that appeared in Out of the Kumbla at the end, when she sent it to us, it was like 126 pages long. And
15, right?
right. And we struggled a lot because Casahoon was ready to publish Out of the Kumbla, and he said, well, we can't publish another 126 pages. So we had to figure out what to do, which portion of it to use. So we used like a portion in the front and the back. But people always wanted to read the full thing, and a few people read it. But so anyway, we did a 30th anniversary celebration of the book, really done so well by E. Cornell, who I was wishing one of them would be here. Hosted it, brilliantly done, perfectly, and it's still online, you can still find it. And at that event, we talked, Miriam was one of the people presenting, Miriam Moyes. So we talked then about bringing out the full Sylvia Winter, 126 pages. Girl. However, some of it was, it was in my folder upstairs. Some of it was in notes that she added in hand by hand.
Yeah.
So we had to really spend time tracking down notes. So this is where Lisa Camp really helped a lot. And she found a lot of stuff, because Winter would mention somebody, but then you wouldn't have the full reference, but for publishing it, we have to do that.
Okay.
So anyway, it's gonna come out next year.
No, it's good. No, actually, we both signed off. Yep. We both signed off. Yes, we both signed off yesterday. Catherine told me you had as well, to send it to the typesetter. So I hope you did, because he said you said you did. So it's gone to typesetting, so it should be out soon. But the thing, yeah, it's called Beyond the Kumbla. The first was Out of the Kumbla. And I just wanted to say about the original title that goes back to Nambika, because Kumbla is a Jamaican word that Erna Brodber, marvelous writer from Jamaica, had used and sort of made us conscious of it. And it means a calabash that a woman is protected in. So getting out of the Kumbla was equivalent to trying to find a word that would mean something in the region. But I just want to say, I don't know how this manuscript survived, because both of us carried this manuscript separately in typescript, old-fashioned typescript, around the world as we traveled about for 30 years. And then thanks to two graduate students.
Right.
My types is open, and then you did
right.
all the
the conjunction was I had offered a Sylvia Winter graduate class here. I don't know if any of them are here, but it was quite an amazing class, and I would tell them about this 126-page manuscript. And a couple of them, students always want to read it. A few read it, but not many. I think right. I know you did. You had to. Lisa did.
You had to.
Right. So she did a lot of, but we just so you know, you have reference in the book.
Yep.
So Lisa, thank you for that work. But it was not easy, and still up until recently, we were still double checking footnotes, trying to make sure. Because what I did was go back in and annotate it as well. So it's two sets of notes.
Yeah.
And the typesetter, we had to make sure they didn't run all together. And so and then tell them about the conversation.
Oh yeah, well, yeah. So we didn't know, at least I didn't. I mean, I'll speak for you, Carole. But when we did that first conversation at the beginning of Kumbla, no idea how many people appreciated that conversation. In later years, it wasn't specifically us maybe, but the conversation, the idea you could have a conversation, which goes back to collaboration and exchanges and so on. So we did it again. So, updated the conversation this time. We practiced it in Amherst, and then we redid it, this time. And so there's that. In the first Kumbla, Nancy Morejon, the Cuban poet, was in Barbados when we did the first Kumbla, and we became friends, and she did an interview in the first one. She agreed to do another, and she came to the Cornell celebration. She did we were all on Zoom because it was COVID. And then we have that, the first section of the conversation and that new interview with her, and then which is very powerful. And then in the last section is our conversations, the new conversations for the future with Miriam, you, and everyone else who came and spoke at the Kumbla celebration, and then other people who wanted to write something. So we have a new conversations going forward. So I think what ended up happening is that conversations has become a metaphor for this work.
Continuing
conversations.
So it's actually called Beyond the Kumbla, Sylvia Winter and Continuing Conversations.
Yes.
That's the title of the work.
Yes,
So
we
you
didn't
get the
get
full Winter essay. And you'll see why we had to select. I see Dana is really happy about that, but she's become a Winter scholar. I was told to do two things. We have to introduce Marcia Douglas, who is writer preeminent. Is Marcia in the room? Writer preeminent, to do a kind of poetic closure. And then we have two videos to show. And then I will say a few things, and my daughters are going to say something, I think.
Yeah. And Carole, thank you
Yes.
for just being you.
So Marcia Douglas is preeminent writer, poet, and she was recently a film actress in the Nanny film, The Queen Nanny. So she's done that too. Go ahead, the floor is yours. I don't know if you need.
Right. So I am one of Carole's earliest student cohorts at SUNY Binghamton, along with Meredith Gadsby and Chiji Akuma, who are both here. So we had early Carole, or early CBD. And I would like to think also that we were probably the first ones to call her CBD. Yeah. I feel that we were the first ones to start calling you CBD. I would like to claim that. Isn't it true, Meredith? Yes. Yeah. 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 It originated with us. Yeah, we would call you that behind your back. Always good things, endearingly. So I feel that my career as a published writer began with Carole. I have this memory of being with you, Carole, at a conference in Miami. I don't know if it was one of the Caribbean Women conferences. And I read there, and I have this memory of you linking your arm in mine, and you taking me, and you said, you need to meet Jeremy Pointing on People Tree Press. And that's really literally how it all began. So I remember, there's something of you linking your arm in mine and walking me across the room. I always remember that. And that's how it all started. So Carole CBD was and continues to be an incredible mentor. And as a mentor extraordinaire, she sets a really high bar. So not only has Carole been a mentor to me over the years, but I would say that through her example, I've also learned how to mentor my own students as well. I learned mentoring from Carole, from you, Carole, and you do set a high bar. So I don't know that I've quite reached that level of mentoring, but you're my model. Carole also creates community everywhere she goes. Look at us all here now. celebrating her scholarship and sharing our own. She creates community, and community is power, as we know. Audre Lorde said, without community, there is no liberation. But probably the most important thing that I've learned from Carole, I would say, is the importance of what it means for a Black woman to own her voice and the value of agency that coming to voice affords us. This is a thread which is woven into her scholarship, her pedagogy, and her personal interactions as well. And two, it's a model which has set my own voice into motion. As a creative writer, I also get to do this both on and off the page. I create voices and unleash them. Here's another memory that I have back in Binghamton. And I know you won't remember this either, Carole, CBD. But one day you said to me, Marcia, you need to just say to people, hello, I'm here. Doesn't that sound very CBD? I got her point, and I've always remembered it. And I think, Meredith, earlier on, you reminded us of making one's mouth a gun. And I think that that's also tied up in the hello, I'm here. So I'm just going to share a little sampling of my work. I know that the food is getting cold out there. So I won't keep you long. But I have in my writing also created women writers, characters who also use their mouth as a gun. I'm going to read you just a little bit from my novel, The Marvelous Equations of the Dread. And this is a moment in which I stir up the dead. It's a moment in which the spirits, it takes place in what you might call a spirit yard. The spirits come forth, the dead have awakened, and they have awakened and returned in response to the sufferation of the people. So this is how it goes. Hear this. They call me Queen Nanny, Nanny of the Maroons. Is me could catch the white soldiers' bullets and spit them out. That is what the books say, but I used to do so much more. I could grind a soldier's teeth and use the powder to light a good fire. I could spot one of them coming from between the trees without turning around. I would feel it, the two red of their jackets on my bare arm. One of them would piss behind a tree and I would hear it a mile off. If the books really said all, the very ink would stink of blood. Let's leave it at that. But see me here. The people have called. I have heard their new time music beating the ground and the feet of the children dancing. Their hopefulness mixed with pain. Listen to me. There is an echo which travels along fault lines. It comes from their music, the strange music of the people. Sometimes the earth shudders and our bones move in their graves. How can we not arise? Up, up, ye mighty, someone sings. An elder steps forward. His long gray locks touch his knees. He carries a staff carved with a lion of Judah. My name is Leonard, he says. Leonard Howell. They call me the first Rasta, but that don't matter now. And they call me a thief, same like they call Garvey. Said I tricked the people with false tickets to Ethiopia. Thief or not, I had a vision. History needed me to keep the wheel turning. Yes, I I come now to organize, to buoy the people up, to higher groundation. Praises. Another woman steps forward. Her head is tied with a piece of flour bag. One furious plait twines against her face. Me don't have no name, she says. Everybody forget it, and not even me can remember it. It happened like that to plenty of we. We sow and plant and cook and sweep and wash and scrub and reap and stir and cry and pray and bend over and scream and break way back and then hold it straight again to send the children to school with piece of pencil so they can learn to write the book of our story and never forget it. I heard the babies crying from my grave, my grands and my grands' grands. And how could I not return mercy? A little girl wipes tears from her eyes. It was election time and gunshot flying to my face, straight up my nose. Me step in front to save my brother. He was only 3 and mama said to mind him while she go look one tin of mackerel. Me catch the shot just like Nanny, only it killed me. My name Hortense, but them call me Tensi. From over this side, I hear my brother, big man he is now, clicking a gun, and the sound of the click make my bones them tremble. Don't I call out, but he can't hear me. I want to stop him. Help me stop him. Stop the violence, the people must stop it. It's long time we have warned them. A man steps forward. It is Garvey. He wears a green velvet vest under a black jacket. He has a hat of plumes. We must hold together now, he says. If the living have no hindsight, then we must be that hindsight. If the living have no foresight, then we must be that foresight. If the living have no wind, then we must be that wind. If the living have no fire, then we must be that fire. Up, up, let us be the terror and the tenderness and the storm and the lullaby. Let us whirl together as one mighty force. Enough of the preaching to Ra, a woman calls. She wears short shorts and long white boots. Is Patsy me name? Even in the grave, my feet keep dance hall. Me is a dance hall rebel woman. Is a rebel dance, me a dance. For if you look, the moves good, you see it's Africa them come from. But the people don't know that. And me never know it neither. His mother Nanny tell me. Is them kind of thing we need, tell the people. We don't need no more preaching. Back to Africa. The people need Africa. Garvey takes off his hat and holds it against his belly. Sister, you are right. This time we will need a ship of a different kind. The people must return to Africa on fleets of the mind. This is where Zion lives. Yes, I. We need a plan, Nanny says. Something great, same as we imagine we nation, yet simple as a goat's milk. That's how the Maroons defeated the enemy. Who would have believed that we could defeat the British with a few roots and river stones and so-so weeds? A woman dressed in white beats a drum between her knees, 3 times 3. Tears run down her face, her lips tremble, 3 times 3. Her hands call, sound uprising, and skin deliverance. But how shall we start? The drums stop. The woman falls to the ground, her body shaking. Someone sprinkles her with white rum. She lets out a sigh, and everyone is quiet. With the children, Bob says. He steps forward into the circle, still wet from storm. My name is Robert Nestor Marley. I man used to play music, but before that was a boy, had a pain in my heart. My heart so heavy it beat with a one drop. Is music and Rastafari save me, but everybody don't so lucky. The youth them, Me hear them bawl at night outside in the road. And when them eye water dry up, them beat them one another. It's them we must start with one mighty force, calls Garvey. The little youth shall lead us. One by one, we must build an army. Sila. Somewhere, a lizard begins to sing. The young girl Hortense rises up, and Bob gives her the drum. Her small hands beat the skin, chanting down Babylon. The spirits sing Nyabingi, and Nanny dances in the circle. She grasps the hem of her skirt as her feet inch the ground, working the perimeter. There is a scent of white rum and a swirl of mango leaf and bird feather. And this is what the drums speak: Zion train coming, Zion train coming. People get ready, Zion train coming. Zion is a place inside, calls Garvey. And this is what the drums speak: set the children free, set the children free, set the children free. Patsy zips up her boots and dances with Nanny in the circle. Who can't sing, clap. Who can't clap, testify. Who can't testify, dance, she calls. Her knees dip and part. A drought travels her spine and rises to her head. It pushes at the space between her scalp and funeral wig. She closes her eyes and whispers, rah. For this is what the drums speak: Zion train coming, Zion train coming. Children get ready, Zion train coming. And the woman with the furious plait begins to cry, for she sees her great-grands far, far on the other side. They have her guinea cheekbones and her ashy skin. Zion is a place inside, she calls, hoping they will hear. And her bare feet dance the words into the dust of the dirt yard. Zion is, Zion is, her heels treading faster. Zion is, Zion is, Zion is, go the drums. And spirit feet massage the ground. For this is the real reason there are almost 200 little earthquakes on the island per year, and why you should pay attention when the photo on the living room wall shifts sideways, your feet unsteady in the hallway. For this is how the long dead rock our fever babies or shake the youth from don't care. So I'm going to just stop right there. But Carole, heart bottom thanks for holding this space for me and for all of us.
Short video to show, and then I'm going to say thank you and my daughters.